Welcome to This Week in X for X-Corp number 3 out on the 14th of July, 2021. We're going to get into our full reaction and a full discussion of this issue where Jamie Madrox does a little bit of a Dr. Manhattan cosplay. Tune in to find out why we think that. All right, folks, we are here to discuss fully X-Corp number 3. It was out on the 14th of July, and this full discussion is going to be full of spoilers for this book, for other books, possibly, apparently, for Watchmen, is what I'm gathering from the panel today. So please be warned of that. For X-Corp number 3, as we always do, we're going to share our initial personal reactions, and then we're going to get into our critical discussion, and we're going to begin that round with Tyler.
The book is definitely improving. And I think it helps when they are focusing on characters and, trying to, do a little bit more on developing the characters. So that is, that makes it a step up from, I wouldn't say from issue 2, because I think I really enjoy issue 2, but it's definitely a step up from issue 1. Art-wise, though, this is a huge step up, even though sometimes takes me a little while to get used to what I call muddy art.
Freya, what did you think?
This is definitely an improvement. I am feeling like it's going somewhere. I still don't know where that somewhere is and why we are on this journey, but I feel like I'll get there eventually. I was so happy to see the weird faces are gone, but I'm also kind of weirded out by the fact that there's now no faces in some of the panels, which is Peter's fault that now I noticed this. I'm going to keep mentioning it. I never noticed it before, but until he mentioned, now I notice it. And also how hard it is to make Angel look hot. Why is everyone failing this? Like, I just don't understand this. But anyway, whatever. I don't know what was the technology that they were trying to do, so that can be a point. I always throw up a little bit whenever Layla Miller and Jamie Madrox's relationship is mentioned, so there is that aspect of it. But otherwise, there were some great moments, character moments, and I feel like this is definitely an improvement from issue 1 and 2 that I didn't quite enjoy or necessarily knew where it's going. So I feel like there's a point. I feel like we're going to get there someday. So based on that, I'm in for the ride.
Now we're going to pitch to our remote correspondent, Harry, to find out his reaction to the issue. I am clearly the target audience of this book, so it's hard for me to even be critical. Like, I talk a lot about liking super people going through bureaucracy, and I realize the thing that I should be saying that maybe will ring for people more is I love things that are Kafkaesque, right? This idea of a serpentine bureaucracy that can't be escaped, a feeling of sort of being inside of a Rube Goldberg machine of boredom perpetually that you cannot escape. Many people would call that Kafkaesque. And I love that this is taking something that many of us have experienced, which is the corporate conference, and also something many of us have experienced, which is a struggle with work-life balance. And it is showing that superheroes are not immune to them. And it's getting us to see these heroes stuck in the drudgery of the same things that we are as regular people. I totally get it if you don't want to read that, and that's not what you're spending money on X-Men comic books every month. But like, I am so here for it. I cannot possibly be more here for it. Furthermore, I love Valentin Delandro. He's the artist and co-creator of Bitch Planet, which is one of my favorite comic books. I love that he's in a slightly more impressionistic kind of look. It's not that he underdraws things, but he does not need to draw every single detail of the thing. He gives you enough shapes, enough moments of the thing that it's going to imply the action and the movement. And he really trusts his colorist. And I think that Sunny Go really stepped up after I gave some critiques last time of Sunny Go to really make it work. Like, this just felt like a really fully realized world. And I think that amount of subtlety that Delandro is capable of, especially in facial acting, especially in body carriage, really, really sold the subtle humor of Teenie Howard's script here in a way that other artist, Foch, just cannot quite do. I actually liked the art from that artist, but their bodies, their facial acting, they can't sell the kind of subtle, the Office style funniness of Freya's doing the face right now. Yeah. You just can't sell that kind of humor, that kind of sarcasm with the way that Foch draws. And I think that Delandro can sell it.
also reminded me a little bit of Matt Fraction's Hawkeye.
Yeah, well,
There's
very
like a
Aja.
like
It's
co-
very that
Yeah.
school. And Go is
Yeah,
doing a
like
very
culture.
Hollingsworth kind of color look here. So I think it totally tracks.
Right. I mean, yeah, even though over there,
Mm.
then having no face made sense.
Yeah.
But over here, it's
No,
like,
I mean, I think for me, the art reminds me a little bit of John Paul Leon,
oh,
the
rest in
late
peace.
John Paul Leon. Yeah, because I think it's just because of the shadows and sometimes the thickness of the lines that is being drawn here, which reads to me a lot of times what I call muddy, because sometimes it's like instead of like a smooth line, it's like one thick line. So so that part is like it always takes me a couple of issues to get used to the kind of art.
Well, and also, and I think this is I think that's a really great comparison, because I think that something that's true about this art and John Paul Leon's art is often the environment is defined by the shadows in the environment rather than the detail. And you almost have to do the thing you do with a Necker cube, where when you look at a cube that's just drawn with the lines, where you have to reverse it in your eyesight to make it pop. You almost have to do that with the shadows to kind of push the thing to be as dimensional as it's supposed to be. I'm looking at the page right now where Madrox is running down the stairs. She's running down a corridor. A lot of these spaces are really defined by these thick black shadings. And when you just are a quick reader and you go by it, especially in the staircase, it kind of just looks like a lot of abstract shapes. And you almost have to push back with your eye to give it the amount of depth and like accordion the panel down. And to me, that is a very John Paul Leon. I mean, he was a master of that. But I absolutely see why you would say that here. And I like that. I really, really like that art style. So I think maybe that's why this one just really hits for me. So Freya, what is the thing that you think most deserves attention in this comic book?
So you mentioned about like, a superhero doing boring things, it's like it's something that really tickles your fancy. And I think like I would have potentially reacted to that as well if this was like superhero related bureaucracy. You know what I mean? Like they have to register, they have to do this. Something that one of the manga and anime, One Punch Man, does very well. There's like a whole bureaucracy of how to be a superhero that's kind of associated with it. But here there's like a business reason. But the thing is, there's another team that's doing that. So I think that's one of the reasons it's not kind of necessarily rhyming with me as much that it should. However, one thing that did rhyme with me is like going to conferences or boring, very dry conferences, which as a professional, sometimes you have to do 95% of the time because of networking. You meet people, you talk to them, shake hands, exchange cards, and you potentially get a job out of that. It's kind of like, at least in my field, that's how it has been. And I've been to countless boring ones. And every single one of them I've been to, there's always a boring lecture of women in engineering, because you cannot have a conference completed without that particular. Either it's going to be women in leadership, women in engineering. It's like women, something, which I am as much. I mean, I really like, I have the same reaction to it as Monet has. So, I mean, Peter kind of wrote in our conversation, in our chat, is like, oh, this is the most Freya scene ever, or, something to that point. And when I read it, I'm like, yeah, this is what Peter was talking about, because it is actually very, I don't know. I don't know, something about this is like kind of very patronizing to me, that it's like, oh, especially in a culture where most of the weddings and most of the things, you are men and women are separated, even in weddings and things. It's just a cultural thing that I grew up and I kind of resented it. And even here in a professional setting where it's like, it's a separation, which I understand there's a different, connotation and different that you can get. But however, something that Monet says over here, why can't, what Angel was saying, well, it's kind of away from all the hubbub of men or something along the line, and where it's like, oh, why can't the men step up? I can also think that way. Like, why can't it be just like, oh, a conference from young engineers, a conference for young, young leaders or something like that. That is not necessarily segregated based on the gender, and also it kind of brings up a whole point where it's like we're kind of going into the whole, as we are like gender and sex has becoming more like diverse. There are like, where does the non-binary people fits into this? Like, how are we kind of looking into that? And it's not only just in like, professional conference. I've also seen that in Comic Cons, which is a really a strange things. Like, it's like, oh, it's about like women writer or women geeks. I'm like, why do we need that? Like, I don't know whether it's just to highlight their thing. Like, okay, why can't we highlight their work along with the men? I mean, I don't know. I always struggle with this, always. So it's kind of good to see that aspect of it presented here in like very much of the same way I would interact with it. So that was one good point.
Something that's so interesting to me about that is I feel like a lot of in the conference world and in the business world, sometimes these things exist to be uplifting, and sometimes they exist because it's the only panel where it's going to be enforced that there has to be representation. And it's kind of like the idea, if it doesn't have women in, or people of color in, or any of it, in business, in art, in comics, whatever, that nobody's going to take the time to make sure that the panel's representative. And so it almost has like a ghettoization effect. And I think back to when I was, the director of a team at a business that was doing pretty well, and I would get invited to this stuff. And my first reaction would be, am I the unique expert in this thing? Or is there somebody in my team who can go, who's just as much an expert as me, and is not just going to be another white person to show up and to talk about this, or it's not just be another person presenting as male to show up and talk about this. And it's interesting because you, as the person who the invites get directed to, it's your job to change it. And Monet has this great thing that she says where, Trinary says, I'd rather talk with women, honestly. And Monet says, yeah, me too, when we're actually given the keys, that these women all very likely work for men. Just like that Sarah St. John woman, she looks independent, but she's just the hand of JP Cole. And it's like, if you're just having these segregated off to the side talks, and it's just going to have all of this, the B team going to the talk, then is that talk actually valuable, rather than the main talk having all of the people who are the most knowledgeable, who aren't necessarily the bosses, who are the men, And so it's just something that I know we're like deep into real life and far away from the comic right now, but it's something that really appealed to me. And I thought that there was a really interesting shade of difference in how they conduct business, in their personal opinions, in their own kind of stridency between Monet and Trinary there, where they kind of are both sides of these coin. Because there's nothing wrong with feeling either of these ways, but this is something that in business you experience in the real world of conferences and networking.
And then the thing is, like, I kind of also enjoyed that aspect of it too, because just because I feel like the way Monet feels, there are women out there who feels like the way Trinary feels, So there is both version of that. And I'm glad to see that it's like not one way or another. And I'm not sure if the way I'm feeling is right. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but that's the opinion I hold about these things. So I think that part of it was kind of done very well. And, it's like sometimes we talk about like, okay, superhero representing, real world and stuff. And I think that aspect of it got done very well.
Well, I want to ask a question of both of you in this too, because it's also encoded with another interesting moment. Infamously right now, Trinary, we've never learned Trinary's actual real world name. She's always referred to as Trinary. And some folks on the internet have seen this as the fact that she's kind of just being used as a de facto, we have this Indian character, isn't it great? With this tech support Indian, and we're not giving her a name or an identity or anything. But here she is kind of among friends. We're making a point of calling Wind Dancer Sophia over and over again, possibly because Wind Dancer is a terrible name, but we're calling her Sophia. They're all talking about, they're saying Monet's name instead of saying like Miss St. Croix or like boss or whatever. And then they're still calling Trinary. And I really think it's interesting. Like, is it that people aren't giving her the thought, or is it actually something deeply about her character that she's like, you don't get to know my human name. I'm Trinary. That's plenty. And I just thought about that a lot in this issue. I'm really interested to hear how the two of you react to that.
So to me, though, it's because she's a hacker, right? That's her thing. So hackers are historically not known to not discuss their real name. Like they kind of hide behind an alias or an avatar, stays behind an avatar. And that for her is perfect because that's what mutants can pick their name, and she's like, she picked the name. And Also, I know for a fact that brown parents often name their kids weird names. Maybe she didn't like her real name. So she's like, not everyone is blessed with a nice name like Fariha. So,
Freya.
she probably didn't like, yeah.
Okay,
It's
Monet.
not Freya.
Yeah.
It's Fariha. So it's like, not everyone's blessed with a beautiful name. So I went to an all girls school, and some of the name that they were roll call, I'm like, oh, I wouldn't walk around with that name. So I don't know. Maybe that's the situation. Maybe her name, like especially when, when non-language speaking people, they tend to butcher the name often, which can happen in any language. It doesn't. It's like, oh yeah, like American. It's not, because when the name is so ingrained with the language, someone who doesn't speak it can butcher it to nothing.
Well, I think that's really interesting because
maybe that's
your name is spelled in every single description of every video. And I try really hard to say Fariha, even though my Philly accent often makes it sound like Freya. But people want your name really badly to be Freya when they're writing it. And they're not, I don't think they're doing it in a mean way. I think they're wonderful viewers and we love them very, very much. It's spelled Fariha, like far from here, Iha. And that's name, but it's exactly to your point. Like your name is not part of the American idiom, and even though these people really love you and all of your knowledge, like they don't actually know your name.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing, it's just, and because of that, like oftentimes, even when I'm actually Emma in every Starbucks I've ever been to.
Emma?
I'm not gonna stand there and give my name, so I tell them, my name is Emma.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand that. So I'm thinking that she's actually doing it from that point of view, and who knows, maybe her name will be revealed at some point.
It would be nice to have that scene with her. Like she doesn't have to tell us her name, but it would be nice to have that moment with Trinary where she's like, my name's none of your business. It's my name, and you're going to say it wrong anyway. Like I would like it if we got that.
Yeah, and wasn't that kind of implied here? Like, because she was like, "Oh, Trinary is the name."
I thought that, but I didn't want to assume that. But that is what I got.
Yeah, and then maybe we'll eventually find there will be a letter sent to her from someone, and then her real name will be there, and she's like, "Oh my God, I need to run now," or something like that. I don't know. It's always a story like that with hackers. So.
Now, Tyler, that's been a lot of back and forth with Freya and I. Before we get to your bring your own point, is there anything you want to add to any of that discussion?
I mean, you guys covered practically the entire base. I have to admit that I've been in the professional world for quite some time, and I have to admit that I actually did not give it any sort of like lengthy thought about, why are they having like specific women in business or women in finance or that kind of conferences. Like I don't think about it and its implication for some reason. So I'm thankful that that I get to talk to you and start to like be more aware of it, and that was when I first read this issue. I was like, oh, so you have a pretty white rich boy saying that, oh, it's nice to have a place for women to network.
I know, it's funny that Angel is like, don't you love this women play area we've put together for you? Like, okay,
it's kind of ignorant and condescending.
It is. Right? It's absolutely condescending.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, Angel is such a himbo.
Yeah.
It didn't even cross his mind that it's condescending. Like
that was my point.
How sometimes I get so mad about like character just being complete ass. In this one, I'm like, oh, Angel.
I know.
Oh, Warren. According to the third.
No, it's like that scene with Monet's like, when they're coming down the escalator, she's like, So I have a question for you guys. In the scene where both Monet and Warren was like, sorry, I'll call you back. We know who called out to Monet,
but who
which
called
is the
Warren?
Sarah St. John's, right? So who called out to Warren?
I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. That was something which I was like, because
Like, was
there
it just
no
his adoring
follow-up.
fans that we kind of saw in the next scene where everybody wanted an attention? Or was it actually something specific and it's going to pay off next issue?
Yeah.
Maybe it
that
was
what I
Mastermind.
thinking.
Mastermind?
Maybe.
I thought that. So here's what I thought. I thought it was Mastermind, and
But it's
because
a question mark.
the launch failed. No, but the launch failed, and Mastermind is going to put that out there that the launch succeed because he does the projection, right? So I thought, and then that's how he's going to be like, oh, see, you need me. Because,
And it was very much set up last issue. So like, even though it didn't happen in this issue, I would not be shocked if the next issue picks up with that, because that was the whole setup of last issue.
Yeah.
right.
But
because the thing is that if you go back and look at it, it's like everyone else is kind of like there's a person behind like, you know, it's just everyone else is like there's no reaction. The reactions are from the mutants, but everyone else's reaction is not that it failed. So I feel like Mastermind is going to be there. It's like it didn't, like it worked, like, you know. And so that's how I took it.
Yeah, but
or I was also looking at the timing of it, so I don't know whether Madrox said something. And
no, but the dialogue box is a question mark. It's like this person doesn't know Warren, so
and Warren cuts eyes, like he looks off frame, like
correct.
Yeah.
So I think that was the part which like sort of caught me. It's like, It's
well,
like, Howard is trying to plant something here. So that's
well, from there, let's jump into Tyler's point. Surely that could not be your whole bring your own point.
No.
What is your bring your own point for this issue?
It's kind of a little bit of a complaint because the 4 mutants that are powering that ionosphere thing, it's not a mutant circuit. It's like everyone just pumping power into this whole thing, and it's like, where is the circuit? I don't see a circuit at all. It's not like they're in a row and one is powering into another and then they are amping it up or something. It's just like everyone is just firing into that thing. And Fariha, sorry for putting you on the spot. As the resident engineer here, do you know what they're talking about? Because I have no idea.
So Madrox says you each have a unique ability to harness and manipulate solar energy. Together, it seems you'll be able to create a mutant circuit that will generate enough power to activate the ionospheric bandwidth generator.
So here's my thing. I think they're trying to do very interesting Wi-Fi situation, or like information for all, because that's something that, you know, being talked about is like, okay, what's the cost of internet and how internet is now a basic human rights because there is so much going on, and then how you get that. So I feel like, you know, how there's a medicine and everything, there's another aspect that mutants trying to do, Wi-Fi for everyone, humans, you know, so something like that. And I think the ionosphere and everything, I kind of lost track of that. I'm like, okay, so is it like, oh, they can like call to Mars maybe, because that's something you need right now. But the thing is, like, it just felt so goofy that they're just all like solar. I mean, I understand there's like a solar energy and converting it over, and then also you can overpower the circuit that it blows up and things like that. But there's also circuit breakers for that, which I would think if Madrox was the engineer that he's being set up to be, should know that and didn't. Yeah, I was just mostly impressed by Vulcan not bouncing off the wall, because I only know him from War of Kings, where he's just insane and and he's just there as a puppy. Some kind of mutant Wi-Fi, telecom, those kind of thing. I am not sure what exactly that they're trying to do here.
I have no idea.
Here's my one minor defense here. They all of them don't just generate solar stuff, they all convert that power in an interesting way. So Sunspot gets charged up by solar power. Bishop gets charged up with any kind of release of energy discharge. Neil Shara, who you could be forgiven if you've forgotten exactly what his power is, he generates heat, he converts heat and solar energy. So he has the ability to convert ambient heat into solar plasma, which means he can create solar plasma. And then Vulcan, I'm not sure. But I think the idea is that each one of them
it's crazy, solar power into crazy.
Yeah. But I think the idea is that each one of them kind of has the thing that triggers the next one. And that's why it's a circuit, but that's why the problem happens. Because Matrix was only, it's like kind of like if you're playing any kind of game and you get too much energy and then there's like a penalty, or you have to, you're going to take damage because you made too much. Matrix was only thinking of how can I make so much? And he never thought about what happens if I don't flip the breaker soon enough. I still think it was a kind of obscured point, and I think it could have had a little bit more of a voiceover about like you can do this and you can do that. But I think it still works.
So maybe they put their hands in and they are all holding hands inside.
They're all holding hands inside and charging each other up. Because Vulcan also does energy absorption and creates energy blasts, and he can siphon energy. So I think it's kind of like that they all can create something and they all can absorb something. That's why it's a circuit.
So, you know how in the 5, it's like very specific way it says that how each of them comes in. There's one after the other. So there is no sequence that's established. It could have easily been done with like caption boxes. It easily could have been done as like how it's like transfers over. But what you have mentioned, in no engineering world it makes any sense. Like how each of those kind of connects. Like you know, so it's not like we saw that Howard can do it when it's like like Gambit stops the bullet in Excalibur that we saw, which makes perfect sense with the kinetic energy that he can do and he can absorb that. It makes sense, but here it doesn't. But then again, we're who is very pretty and have angel wings, and there's at some point you have to accept it.
But then here's like the deeper thing that Tyler's question makes me think of. Why are we doing mutant Wi-Fi? Like it almost reminds me of a company that gets really successful, and then they're like, we're going to introduce this product that has nothing to do with our core product, and we don't have any expertise in it at all, but we're big enough in the market that you should just buy it. It's like, Nike shoes, and we're going to make a Nike popsicle because we're Nike, and you're probably still going to buy it. But it kind of almost speaks to like the overreach of X-Corp and like how this is maybe not planned well enough and how it is going to fail. Like why is it Wi-Fi? And like, why is there a way of solving Wi-Fi, like charging up the ionosphere? Why is this their second product? It just feels like there's so many other things that they could be moving into. And I thought that was kind of part of the message of this. Like it is going to fail because they're moving outside of their expertise because of their hubris.
And then the thing is, like, it's like first issue, we had that floating fortress thing. And now this, I'm like, I don't know. It's, there's like one, I don't want to mention their name, but there is one new comic publisher who are doing just hijinks to get their comics out there to the door. I feel like this kind of feels like that. It's like, we're just going to do stuff to get people woo.
It's like McDonald's has tacos now. Why? McDonald's? You shouldn't have tacos. Ugh. Leave that to the experts.
No one should. No, I'm just gonna McDonald's.
Now you have the taste in your mouth now.
Of McDonald's tacos. It's our burger, our classic burger as a taco. That's what this feels like to me. Okay. Peter, here's my bring your own point, which I think you all probably knew that I wanted to talk about this and very kindly left space around it for me to talk about, which is Madrox here. And it's just so fascinating what Teeny Howard is doing with Madrox, because there's two parts of it. One part of it is literally about how his power works. This opening data page, one of my favorite data pages of ever. Basically, him at the whiteboard being like, here's our duplication schedule for the week. We branch out, we make sure we're good at our roles. We have 2 days of major contribution. I'll reabsorb anybody who's underperforming. And at the end of the week, we have a margarita and you all get absorbed again. Not only is it a hilarious comment on his powers, but it's literally agile. It's if you've ever worked in agile and you have sprints, and it's like, you have the ceremonies and the sprints, and the ceremonies each have a purpose. And at the end of the sprint, everybody comes together and does a retro. This is the Madrox version of agile. It is utterly hilarious. It's so good. But again, target audience of Peter. So there's that aspect of it, but also the aspect that I think is a little bit lost that I think is interesting is just because Madrox can absorb the memories of all of his dupes. And he maybe has a little bit of a power in order to kind of keep that straight in his head. He doesn't have infinite recall as one of his powers, to the best of my ability to recollect. Funny joke, it's a joke. Because he's not Prodigy. So like, even if he makes 100 dupes and he has them doing everything and they're raiders at the Hellfire Gala and they're scientists in his lab, he doesn't necessarily have 100% perfect recollection and use of all of their knowledge just because he absorbed it. It's like, you know, me trying to read 4,000 comics a year. I don't remember them as well as Tyler, who does not quite read 4,000 comics a year. So I thought that that was a really interesting kind of say without saying thing, which is that he's stretched too thin. But then that, and then I promise I'm going to be quiet and let you guys talk, that then becomes the metaphor for work-life balance. He has stretched himself too thin as a mutant. He stretched himself too thin at work. He's just had this major catastrophe in the Savage Land, and he's working overtime to try to make up for that. And here at home, he has his child about to take its first steps, and he can't even be there for that because he's in the middle of this big launch. And his solution is, I'm going to send a dupe because that's fine. It's fine to multitask. I'll send a dupe. I'll remember it all. And then he winds up losing that most precious memory because that dupe gets blown up and his experiment goes wrong because multitasking is not real. Our brains are not really built to do that. So it becomes this whole cyclical, and, you know, Freya was the one, I'll let Freya pay off that Dr. Manhattan joke because it was her joke. But it's kind of this cycle of like, bureaucracy and mutants. Like, you have a power, you think it's going to make you be able to do something more than human, but no, it's the same Kafkaesque nonsense that every human being who's a parent has to do in their workplace, and you're going to fail just as hard as humans fail because mutants are really not all that different from humans. And it was crushing. It was a shot through the heart, him saying that's, you know, it's why I left my job to be a stay-at-home parent. It's a huge part behind our move to New Zealand. I mean, I just felt all that on the page. And as a parent, it was very, very affecting to me because it is the choice. It is the wager you have to make. There was a point that I was only seeing my daughter 2.5 hours a day. I had a great job. It paid a lot. I loved it. I may never have a better job in my life. But in exchange, I saw my daughter 2.5 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and so it's kind of like, I can't speak to it as a non-parent, but the thing is, like, it's also about, like, you know, your work-life balance in terms of how do you enjoy it? Like, you know, stretching too thin is something that we can all relate to as professional, like, you know. And then things like, I always keep thinking about, like, you know, he reabsorbed all his dupes. I'm like, did he reabsorb the one that tried to serve margarita to Namor? Because that one, like, you know, that must have like horrified him. Like, you did what? Like, you know, especially, and I was actually kind of thinking about that too, because it's like he's making so many dupes of himself. Some of them are not necessarily high functioning or doing high level, like, you know, a lot of work. But the thing is, like, he's also getting those back, and then how is that affects him to do like menial jobs versus like high performing jobs. And then there's this, like, there's a whole divide to it, then how he's reconciling that within himself.
Yeah, and then to take that all back in and to have each of those minds hold an equal weight. Like, he's got the memories of the waiter who served Namor the margarita and the memories of the nuclear scientist, and he's got to somehow reconcile them, but they all have the same weight to him because that's how his power works.
Exactly. So the thing is, like, I think I was like mostly kind of like, you know, thinking about that. I'm like, maybe we should just bring another Madrox in here and then Madrox Prime, because we can clone and then just whack him later. I don't know, something like, you know, we have to do something, or find another mutant who can do
there's
this,
millions of mutants.
Yeah, I mean, find another one that can do this. And then, so and also, like, it's also kind of a little bit of commentary on corporate world as well. It's like, oh yeah, if you're not high functioning, we're getting rid of you.
You're all replaceable. You're all just peons. You're all just little meeple that go around and like just flick one of you off the board and put another one in.
And you know, and I'm gonna give you a margarita for your service. You know, like, it's not all bad before you're reabsorbed. Because we have already
none of you get a weekend. Only I get a weekend. I'm Madrox Prime.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, we also know that his dupes, most of them actually are sentient. Like, they can have their own lives, and they can have so I think, like, I found that to be a little bit horrifying.
It was super horrifying. Like, Tyler, anything you want to add again to Freya and I going back and forth?
No, I mean, part of me is like, why was thinking, like, why did he not create a dupe to take over the supervision job post? Like, why does he have to be the one there? Like, why does he not go back to his family?
he says that he's the one who knows everything and he doesn't trust dupes to do it.
Yeah, but
Even
when
though
he,
it still failed.
yeah, but when he creates a
Still.
dupe, that at that particular instant, the dupe will know everything that he knows up to that point, right?
Right, but there's something here where he thinks as the prime, I'm going to be better. There's like a certain amount of pride, again, hubris, that,
Yeah.
only the prime can supervise
Yeah.
this.
So that's the part which I was
Right.
thinking. It was like, okay, so he made a choice. He basically prioritized that part over the
Mhm.
family life, and as sad as it is, that he lost it. I was thinking, was he sad that he lost that memory, or was he sad that he cannot continue this lie anymore? Because when he goes back to Layla and he doesn't have that piece of memory, they can talk about it.
He's always sad when he loses data, as he says.
Yeah, this is where his inner Dr. Manhattan came in, because that's kind of nonsense he pulls as well. So
But
I
I
don't
think
know whether it was in the comic or it's just in the movie, that weird movie that we all saw. But anyway.
But I think that's part of why it hit for me so much, because that job that I loved was working with data, and I became a real expert in data. And it was like one of those things where I started to see everything through the lens of data, like how much profit can this be? How much time does this need? Like how much will I remember about this interaction with my kid? And it's like when you nobody made me do that. That was my interpretation of work-life balance at that time in my life, and I learned a lot from it. But it's kind of like, yeah, it felt really, really true to me. It'd be like, oh darn, I had to take a 7:00 meeting, so I actually missed all the bedtime stuff with my daughter. But that's just lost data, which I'm not like that anymore. Like now my hard and fast rules, like I do not take meetings during family time, and if the client is going to fire us, oh well. But that's a growth that I came to after going through this whole journey, and it's really presented very accurately here on the page.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. That is our discussion of X-Corp number 3. If you're looking for discussions of other X-Men comic books, we've got them, because we have discussed every X-Men comic book issue since the beginning of X of Swords. So just look elsewhere on the channel. And Freya, we get together every week to talk about the X-Men because
X-Men is better when it's read together.
That is right. And when we can share the experiences that we have as human beings that make these comics interesting to us. So on the behalf of 3 human beings here, possible mutants, unconfirmed, Freya, Tyler, and I, we want to thank you for being a part of this weekend. Freya's a mutant. We want to thank you for being a part of
Magneto.
This Week in X. And until we get to talk to you again, human or mutant, we hope that you are well.
Bye.
Bye.